Welcome to regional preview for college baseball. We are in regional week, and this is when all the fun gets really started. We will be running through all the top stories from the field of 64, as well as giving our preview from each of the regionals and maybe some predicting along the way. But those might have a little bit of changes throughout the week as we set our final predictions up for the weekend. Going forward, also have some further out predictions predicting the 8 for Omaha and the final two and overall champion, doing all that fun stuff. But first, just gonna discuss the overall vibes of the selection process and what went down on Selection Monday. Not too much controversy, I would say, but a little tweaks here and there that probably would have liked to see. Usually, there's a lot more stuff to talk about, but I think the main one, probably Kentucky making it in and not even being a last four team in, is the big thing. Getting 13 SEC teams is pretty crazy, especially with Kentucky not doing well in the conference tournament. Didn't really prove it at the end. But yeah, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think the committee honestly did a very good job this year. I would have liked to see Georgia Tech as a host winning the ACC regular season championship, especially with Danny Hall in his last year on the retirement tour. Maybe it shouldn't necessarily be a factor, but I feel like at the same time you could give them the edge there with that as well. But my main gripe, like you already mentioned, is Kentucky making the field. It's not horrible, but I just don't agree with it whatsoever. I think UConn should be in over them. I think my main thing with a team like with Kentucky making it is just 13 and 17 in SEC. They're 8 and 19 in Q1 games, and I think at some point you have to give these mid majors a chance in the tournament here with SEC teams. I think one of the things people value is the strength of schedule, but at the same time, when you're 8 and 19 in Q1 games, we have plenty of sample size against of what you do against top competition, and it's not good. You're not even winning a third of your games against the top teams in the country. So why would we give you another chance to do so? A team like UConn, 7 and 11 in Q1, it's not amazing, but it's better than Kentucky's record, and they haven't had as much opportunity. Let's give them another chance. You could have them in over Miami as well, who they beat on the road. And another thing I'll say with these mid majors, a lot of these Q1 games they're playing could be midweeks against these top teams or early season road trips at these teams down south, especially for the teams up north. They're at a disadvantage early in the year. But a lot of these losses they may pick up in Q1 are midweeks, whereas the SEC teams, it's on the weekend against these top teams. You're throwing your top arms. So we know what you're doing with your best out on the field, and it's still not good. So why are we giving you another chance?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to convince me. I've been saying, I feel like for years, that if you're under 500 in a conference and you don't win the conference tournament, you shouldn't make the field of 64. Even if the SEC, I mean, yes, it's the most stacked conference. Everybody knows that. There's no denying it. But if you can't win half your games, like, if you're not an average team in a conference, you shouldn't be rewarded with going to have a chance to win the national championship. I just think it's ridiculous. I've been saying that for a while. But obviously, everything gets validated when these teams that are under 500 in the SEC make super deep runs, and then they're given just another opportunity each year. Seems like there is a team, Florida last year, and it seems like every year they're doing the same thing. And previously with Ole Miss, Mississippi State, not top teams in the conference regular season, but then making runs to win the national championship. I just think sure, they have the talent and they can make those runs like we've seen, but I don't think they should get the opportunity to if they're not putting together a strong regular season. And it just completely negates the just overall impact of having a regular season in the SEC. If you just have to scrape by to make the tournament in that conference, while in other conferences you have to, maybe if you even win the regular season and you have a great RPI, or not, I mean, not necessarily great, but in the 40s for some of these mid majors is pretty top notch for a lot of them. And if they don't win their conference tournament, it doesn't even matter. We're looking at like UConn, Xavier, a lot of teams right around that mark, just getting skipped out on every year, year in year out. Yeah, it's just tough to look at. I feel bad for those teams that put together really strong regular seasons and did try to make their most of their non-conference scheduling, and just because they don't have a good conference, they get dragged down out of contention for a postseason spot. And we just consistently see that for teams in the SEC, and in the ACC also some mediocre teams occasionally make it, but primarily it's the SEC. Those teams that are you know just at the bottom, especially this year with having two absolute bottom dwellers, basement dwellers in the SEC, with Missouri and South Carolina kind of boosting up everybody's record as well. Those 13 wins that is usually the marker for a team in the SEC, I feel like doesn't mean as much, especially teams that did face those teams. So it's a tough pill to swallow, but it's just where the college baseball world is, and I think I haven't really been on board with expanding the playoffs the past few years, but I think adding going to 68, matching what basketball is like, having just a play in at the field already for a few of these teams would help. Maybe some of those mid majors that are right on the outside looking in, making it. I know that also puts in the play for maybe A&M or Virginia to also make it, but after having abysmal years starting number one and number two preseason, and not having good seasons at all, and just getting lucky in that sense. But I think it's worth it to give the opportunity for mid majors that have definitely deserved a chance, and are regional caliber teams, just overall record wise and what they've proven on the field. And yeah, it's just a tough pill to swallow for these teams like UConn and Xavier. We saw them on the TV screens for Selection Monday, and to be sitting there and waiting and not having your name called is a tough time.
Yeah, I think it's especially tough for those programs as well because they've both shown postseason success recently. You've had UConn reach in super regionals. Xavier's performed fairly well in the regionals they've played in, been very competitive, made some regional finals. So it's not like these teams are, getting thrown around once they do get in the postseason. They're competing and showing they're worthy of being there. So I feel like you have to give those guys the benefit of the doubt that they're well coached and, are able to execute at a high level. Just not a fan of a team like Kentucky getting in when the Q1 record is that poor. I'd rather even see Virginia in, who performed pretty well against top competition, had a very good record in ACC play, decent record in Q1 and Q2. I think it's a better resume than Kentucky had. Just the RPI was very poor.
Yeah, I think we're looking at teams like also probably Troy, team that only lost one weekend series the entire year, had pretty impressive results, but obviously just wasn't able to sweep a lot of teams, and that was the undoing of them. Just RPI wasn't good enough in a similar position as some of these other mid majors. But on the other side of things, there were a lot of teams that might have been on the bubble, right outside of the bubble, who proved it in their conference tournament. So there isn't that as much controversy as we've seen in the past, because teams like Rhode Island, who were not really close, but were forcing their way into some sort of conversation, and made a move. Similarly, Cal Poly, a team that was right on the bubble before conference tournament, and just forced their way into the conversation throughout the conference tournament, and then didn't even need to have that in conversation in the end of things, because they won the whole conference tournament there. So there were a lot of teams that did that just took the path, the decision that the committee would have need to make, and just took it out of their hands completely. And that's what you want to see this time of year, is teams going on hot streak, and proving themselves as teams that are worthy of making the tournament. And Cal Poly is definitely a team that did that there. A lot of people were they were trending kind of down the end of the year. They looked like a regional team for most of the year, but they were able to ramp it up right at the right time and turn things around and prove that they deserved to be, and there was no reason to doubt them. And obviously clinching a spot automatically helps in that discussion.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned your recent performances should be a factor as well. How well you're playing to end the season. another gripe I have once again with Kentucky and Miami. Kentucky lost 4 straight to end the year. Miami lost 6 of their last 7. So they're not playing extremely well to end the year either. I'm not sure why we continue to give them the benefit of the doubt when pretty much everything is against them besides the RPI.
Yeah, I mean it's a similar discussion we always have. Is RPI is overused. There's more than just that. I think they did use the eye test a little bit more this year than we've seen in the past. Like last year was pretty much just RPI from the jump. There was no other consideration. It felt like, but yeah, it seems like eye test had a little bit more pull on the side of things. But I think another minor gripe that I probably have is Auburn being seated a little too high, and North Carolina being seated a little too low. We saw North Carolina win their conference tournament and looked amazing doing that. Auburn, yes, has the number one strength of schedule, but I don't know. They have a lot of losses, and North Carolina, a team that I thought proved to be easily a top four seed, ended up being five, and I think maybe should have been like that number two. But it doesn't really matter in the long run of things. They still have a top eight seed. They're still going to be hosting super regionals if they make it that far. And yeah, so once you get past that point, it doesn't really matter. You're going to be facing the hottest 8 teams in Omaha, anyways. But I think seeding wise, it was a little disappointing on that side to see the SEC take all top four seeds.
Yeah, I definitely expected North Carolina to be in that top 4, especially after the conference tourney run they went on. I do think Auburn is very good. Like you said, number one strength of schedule. They're up there for close to the most Q1 wins in the country as well with 16. So a lot of quality wins on that resume. But I do think North Carolina has looked better when they're at their peak. And, just with how they played to end the season, I did expect them to be up there. Not a huge issue or anything. Like I said, I think the committee did a great job overall. There was just a few things that could kind of go either way, and Kentucky was the only one that I really didn't like to see.
Yeah, and I think this just goes to show this year, especially, there's just been so much parity in college baseball. Not really a consensus number one team for the majority of the year. 5 weeks ago, we didn't even have Vandy ranked. Now they're the number one seed. Just proves that if you go on a hot streak, especially this year, it was just up for grabs, that number one seed. I mean, Texas had a pretty good run for a while, but falling off late gave an opportunity for any team to really go and take it, especially in the SEC. But coming from me, I still think Vandy is overrated. As the number one seed, I would love that matchup as a 16, but I think that goes for a lot of them. There's no team that is just utterly dominant and a very scary for an opposing team to come in. I feel more along the lines of fan bases that going to on the road for a lot of these SEC schools is a tough pill to swallow. That's the major thing. Maybe not necessarily the roster that they put on the field, but more the atmosphere that in Arkansas, LSU, some of these crazy, just amazing atmospheres that SEC schools can pull. Really, just give such an advantage, especially in the postseason.
Yeah, I do think, like you mentioned, I think it's pretty balanced across the board. I think the committee did a really good job of balancing all of these regionals. There's a couple that you might say are a little tougher than the rest. Looking at like Ole Miss's regional is a difficult one, Southern Miss as well. But other than that, I think all the regionals are pretty balanced. I think LSU has the easiest regional, but once again, that's the only one that I think is extremely light. I think they did a great job making most of these very competitive, and should be interesting to see who comes out of all these. I don't think there's any teams that are clear favorites to win it all right now. It's up in the air, and could see a lot of different teams making Omaha. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, we'll run through each regional in a sec. I just wanted to end this little segment off with some interesting stats. That it's the first time the number one preseason team didn't make the tourney since 1991. That's crazy, especially considering that number one and number two didn't make it this year. We always mention with our preseason rankings that it's kind of a crapshoot. You never know which teams aren't going to be good, but to see the top two be those, it's crazy. I mean, last year I think Florida and TCU were teams in the top 10 that really didn't prove it. I mean, Florida turned it on late to force their way back into the conversation there, but for the majority of the season, they were not even close to being a top 10, even a top 25 team there. But yeah, I think this year, especially number one and number two, those were teams that looked like they could be the dominant team, having super complete rosters from the outside looking in, and then to not pull through at all is pretty crazy. And yeah, for those teams, I don't feel bad that they necessarily missed out. We were talking about Virginia earlier, but they did have a pretty good conference record. They did miss the Florida State series, which might have helped them out, but could have hurt them too if they get swept. So who's to say what really happens in that series? But yeah, both those teams just didn't do enough, especially with the roster they were given. It's kind of embarrassing for that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, we say it every year in the preseason. There's usually like two or three top teams that aren't going to end up, staying in the top 10 or in the top 25, but you don't expect them to be missing the tournament altogether necessarily, especially the number one and number two teams. Just crazy that it happened to both of them. And, Tennessee right there along with them almost missed out on hosting. We almost had like across the board, those three teams were the top three teams in most rankings and almost had all three of them not hosting. Tennessee turned it on at the end there in the conference tourney a bit, but just pretty wild to see the very top teams underperforming altogether.
Yeah, we were pretty down on Tennessee having them at the back half of the top 10 there, but still ended up being a lower seed than that. So looking pretty good for us, especially with your prediction, but still somehow pulled through in that conference tournament, got enough wins there to get a seed. But yeah, we can jump now into the field of 64, previewing and predicting what we think could happen in each regional, starting with the number one overall seed, Vandy. They won the conference tournament, looked really good, super impressive. Not the team that I thought they were going to pull through with, but they did it, and I think they have one of the more favorable regionals. I think Louisville's a pretty weak 2, could have been a 3. But, ETSU, very interesting squad. Have put together a really good season. I think they have a chance to make some moves here. But I do think the committee just gifted the number one seed a relatively easy regional because they put together a solid season, and they should have one of the easier regionals because of that.
Yeah, I think we both came into the selection show expecting Louisville to be a 3 seed, but yeah, ended up being a 2 here, and it is a very favorable one for Vandy. I think this is up there with the LSU regional as one of the lightest ones in the field. Vandy's been playing extremely well. I don't think they're the number one team in college baseball, but they're the number one seed, and rightfully so did get a fairly easy regional here.
Yep, I think so too. Now on to the predictions. Who do you have coming out?
I'll take Vandy to come out of it.
Yeah, I also have Vandy just based off of I think they have a relatively easy 4 seed, and then that puts them on the right path there. So pretty easy path for them, but who knows, could get tripped up. They don't have the typical SEC fan base to give them insane home field advantage there, but still should be a pretty easy route to Supers. Now going to the head-to-head for Supers, we have number 16 seed Southern Miss with Alabama, Miami, and Columbia as the other teams in the regional. I think this is a super balanced one. Columbia, I think, is one of the better 4s. Could have been a 3 seed if you really wanted to nitpick things here. So for them to be a 4 with Alabama and Miami, even though some might say Miami maybe didn't deserve to make the tournament, they are a scary squad. They have proven they went on a very good run in the middle of the season where they barely lost any games and put them in a position to make the postseason. They weren't even close for a while. And then Alabama, a team with a great RPI, has proven it against some SEC schools. Almost beat Vanderbilt in the series. They really should have. They could have really blown things up there, and in that case, but Vanderbilt then went on a run to put them in position to be that number one overall seed. But this is a tough one. I think Southern Miss really has their hands full with this one. Two of the more dangerous 2 and 3 seeds as well. So maybe the most balanced regional I've been looking at. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I do think this is a stacked regional, arguably the toughest one here, and once again, probably should be given it's the 16th seed. Um, but yeah, it's a tough one to pick. Could certainly see Alabama or Miami coming out of this one, but it's really difficult to pick a 2 or 3 seed when both of them are solid because if they lose that game one, and it's very possible, it's a tough route to climb out of, and have to win that many games in a row to climb out of the regional. So I'm gonna stick with Southern Miss here, just because they don't have tough of a matchup in that first game. Columbia, a very solid four, um, but just the fact that that Alabama Miami matchup, hard to be certain on who's coming out of that one. So I'll just stick with Southern Miss.
Yeah, I have Alabama here. Yeah, I do think it's really a toss up. Any of these teams I could see coming out, even Columbia, if they put together a good run here. But just to have an inkling that Alabama might be able to figure it out and pull through on this side of the bracket. But now going to the 8 seed Oregon State Corvallis Regional, TCU, Southern California, and St. Mary's joining them. I think it's pretty balanced overall. TCU, a fringe host, maybe should have been a host. So they'll try to show that they deserve it. But the Southern California team, not a team to look past. And obviously, Oregon State has a great fan base, so we'll be showing up there. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is a very balanced regional. You could argue TCU is the toughest 2 seed in the field. Like you mentioned, could have potentially been a host, maybe should have been a host, as the top team in the Big 12, RPI wise, and you know, right there on the fringe. Yeah, and USC also a very solid team. Uh, I'm going to go ahead and take TCU to come out of this one. Uh, Oregon State has had a great year and they have a great fan base there, but I don't think Oregon State has necessarily impressed me a ton in their top competition. And so I like the way that TCU was playing down the stretch. And I think when you get a team a little pissed off that they didn't get to host, I think that could feed as momentum as well and give them a boost going on the road here. So I'll take TCU.
Well, you can't forget Oregon State was also the best team in their conference. So they really led the independents to dominance there, had the best RPI as a conference. So, Oregon State really not a team to look past here. I'm gonna stick with them. I think they've a favorable matchup in the 4 seed St. Mary's, a decent squad, but I think Oregon State will outmatch them and then set them on the right path there. So I'll stick with the host in this one. But now going to their competition on the other side, we have the Tallahassee Regional, Florida State, the 9 seed, with Northeastern, Mississippi State, and Bethune Cookman as the 2 through 4s. I think good 2 and 3 seeds, bad 4, really benefits Florida State in that case. But I think Northeastern, Mississippi State should be a very interesting matchup. See what happens. Northeastern, I think 27 straight wins. So obviously lesser competition there, but I do think that they'll be confident going into that Mississippi State game. They won't be scared of SEC competition because of that. They'll come in firing. So it'll just be interesting to see how they match up against them.
Yeah, this is a good regional, and I honestly like. I feel like a lot of people are going to take Mississippi State to take down Northeastern here, but I feel pretty good about Northeastern winning that first matchup. And like you said, a light 4 seed here. I feel like Florida State will have the ability to save Jamie Arnold if they'd like. And so if they save him for the winner's bracket game, feel very confident in Florida State coming out of this one. I think they're just by far the most talented team in this regional. Northeastern, very good team. Mississippi State, a talented team as well. But I think Florida State is just head and shoulders above them, talent wise and team wise. And so I'll stick with the host here.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. Sticking with with Florida State in this case. Now we'll head to Chapel Hill with number 5 overall seed North Carolina hosting Oklahoma, Nebraska, and Holy Cross. I think tougher regional. Nebraska being hot, Oklahoma, they've shown that they can play pretty well against good teams now in the SEC. It's tough to look past North Carolina in this case. They have looked extremely good down the stretch. Pretty much for the last half of the season, they have looked like one of the best teams in the country. And then going on that run in the conference tournament proved it. They just looked dominant for most of the games there. And I do think they, like I mentioned before, deserved a better seed here. But with that 5 seed, definitely hard to look past North Carolina here.
Yeah, I also have to stick with North Carolina here. It just has looked like one of the best teams in the country to close out the year. They have one of the best records against tough competition, 26-10 against Q1 and Q2 teams. So very good record. So they've handled those tough teams they've played. I think Oklahoma's going to have to, burn Witherspoon in that first matchup against Nebraska. And so North Carolina just playing super well offensively, and the pitching staff is clicking right now. So I think they just come out of this one with ease, honestly.
Yeah, I think that is my opinion as well. Now headed to their opponents in Supers, the Eugene Regional number 12 overall seed Oregon hosting Arizona, Cal Poly, and Utah Valley. One of the weaker 4 seeds, but both Arizona and Cal Poly looked very good in their conference tournaments. Both won it, so very hot right now. Arizona for a while looked like a potential host, fell off a little bit late, but turned things around. Cal Poly, kind of a similar thing, not looking like a host, but for regionals, making it that far. Turned it on late. Didn't put any doubt in the minds of most people going down the stretch there with their conference tournament wins. And then, Oregon didn't look amazing in the conference tournament, but I think home field advantage will help them out here, get back to being settled there. And should, I think, take this regional here. But definitely scary Arizona and Cal Poly here.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Oregon, very solid team, and then you have 3 conference tourney champs, so teams coming in with momentum. Arizona's a very capable team that could come out of this regional. Not exactly sure what to think about them right now. Like I said, I think they're very capable. Just won the conference tournament, obviously, but right before that, lost a series to Utah at home. And so that was one that didn't really make sense. And so they're coming in with momentum, but I do think Oregon is the more well-rounded team. And like you said, home field advantage as well. I'll just stick with the host here once again.
Yep, now headed to Conway for number 13 overall seed Coastal Carolina, hosting Florida, East Carolina, and Fairfield. I think this is a tough regional with ECU now getting hot. They don't have the same roster that they typically have talent-wise, but they're still gritty, and East Carolina, Coastal Carolina always shows out. And now having Florida as the 2, they've been really good down the stretch. Didn't do well in the conference tournament, but we're looking like potential hosts if other teams fell in certain ways that didn't happen. But yeah, Florida, a very scary team. And I just have the feeling Coastal Carolina is not going to make it out. Don't necessarily know who's going to top them, but this is a very difficult regional for them.
Yeah, this Florida team, arguably the toughest 2. I'd say it was probably between them, TCU, maybe Alabama as well as the toughest 2 seeds in the field. I feel like Florida is going to be the popular pick here for the people, especially with how many times Florida has made Omaha recently. It seems like every single year they find their way there. So I'm going to go with the sleeper pick and take the 1 seed, Coastal Carolina, act like I'm making a bold move. I think Coastal has just looked extremely well-rounded this year. The pitching staff has been dominant. Obviously, it's in a little bit of a weaker conference, but, the Sun Belt still is solid, some solid teams there, and I like the way they've looked. And East Carolina coming in as the 3, kind of a sleeper team there. This hasn't been a great season compared to their recent teams, and so maybe they're coming in with a little fire under them and might be able to pull off an upset against Florida in that first game.
Yeah, they might come in with, different expectations. At least preseason definitely didn't have the same expectations as a typical East Carolina team. And who knows, maybe this is the team that breaks them into Omaha. But I'm going with, I guess, not the sleeper pick here in Florida. It just felt too easy. They've always put together insane runs, at least of recent memory in the postseason, especially with the team underperforming. So when that happens, they've known how to get hot at the right times, and I just feel like this Florida team is primed for it once again. But now looking at their opposition on the other side for Supers, we have the Auburn regional number 4 overall seed hosting NC State, Stetson, and Central Connecticut. I don't think this is a very difficult. I think this is a two team regional with Auburn and NC State. I don't know about Stetson being a 3 seed. That was a pretty interesting take there, especially since I don't believe Auburn really should have had that for number 4 overall seed. So I think they definitely benefited from that. NC State, very good team that can beat good teams, but have been a bit inconsistent. But I think Auburn has a very good opportunity to come out of this regional. This is one where it's definitely a coin toss for me. I'm gonna go NC State in this case, just for a little upset, and because I don't think Auburn really deserves the seed that they were given. Maybe that's my bias showing, but I'm gonna stick with my guns here.
Yeah, like you said, definitely feels like a 2-team regional, which means we'll probably see an upset pick somehow. Um, but I'm gonna stick with Auburn here. Just them being at home, and I do think they're a very well-rounded team and battle-tested. Have arguably the most well-rounded hitter in the SEC, Ike Irish. Been incredible the whole season, and so I feel like this is a team coming off a bit of a disappointing year last year, on fire now and ready to prove themselves in the postseason. So I'll stick with the host once again.
And now headed to the Austin Regional, where number 2 overall seed Texas hosts UTSA, Kansas State, and Houston Christian. A lot of teams that are relatively close to Austin, Texas there. So not a ton of travel for some of these teams, but I do think it is a pretty light regional overall for Texas. But this Texas team has struggled down the stretch. Haven't looked the team that they were for a lot of the season. They have had some injuries and definitely started to eat at them a little bit. But I do think UTSA very beneficial, not having to travel very far, being that 2 seed. Definitely benefits them, but we'll see. K-State has struggled against top competition. Don't really see them as a threat to Texas here, but you never know with, like I mentioned, Texas being a little down as the end of the season comes around. I still do think they will have enough to get through, but I wouldn't be super surprised, even though they're a 2 seed, if they don't make it out of their regional.
Yeah, this is a bit of an interesting one with Texas struggling down the stretch a little bit. Still won the SEC pretty handily, but Texas is banged up. Doesn't look like they're playing their best right now, and so I could see them getting upset here. I'll stick with Texas, with them being at home here, but it wouldn't shock me to see Kansas State or UTSA come out of this one. I think UTSA's kind of been underrated throughout the year, just continued to win games and perform well throughout the entire season, but kind of slid under the radar a lot of the season, it feels like. I think they're one of the better mid-majors out there. Could see them giving Texas a run for their money here, but I'll stick with Texas.
Yeah, it seems like the easy pick, even though they have been a little down. But now going to their super regional opponents, Los Angeles Regional number 15 seed UCLA hosting UC Irvine, Arizona State, and Fresno State. I think a pretty good 2 and 3. Fresno State also not a team to look past here, but I think they will get outmatched by UCLA here. UC Irvine, Arizona State, both teams that could put up their own offense, but I think they have had their struggles recently. UC Irvine didn't look the best going down the stretch. They've they were in great position to potentially host and fell off a little bit late. They did make a run in the conference tournament, so kind of made up for that a little bit. But still, yeah, one of the tougher two seeds, I think, especially considering that they're staying on the West Coast. This regional is very West Coast heavy. Just keep the West Coast on the West Coast in this one. But yeah, I think Arizona State also has shown that they can be a pretty competent team, but has also shown their flaws. So this UCLA squad, what I've seen of them, they've looked very complete. Look like just what you'd expect out of UCLA, the talent that they're getting. I think Rock Chalowski is one of the top players in the country. He's definitely making a run the end of the year to put his name maybe in contention for the Golden Spikes. Has looked very impressive, a very good defender as well. So from that, I think UCLA just has looked very complete down the stretch, and that'll continue at home throughout their run here.
Yeah, UC Irvine, very dangerous two seed. Looked like a team most of the year that could be hosting, but UCLA took over that last West Coast spot available there. I do really like this UCLA team. Very dangerous when they're playing at their best. I'll stick with UCLA here. Wouldn't be shocked to see UC Irvine come out of here, but like you said, UCLA just with Chalowski as well, just one of the best players in the country. Golden Spikes semifinalist and certainly in contention to win that thing at this point. Yeah, I'll take them to come out of here.
Yep, now headed to Oxford. Number 10 overall seed Ole Miss hosting Georgia Tech, Western Kentucky, and Murray State. I think this could be a very offensive regional. All the stats show that it should be. The beer showers will be flying, hopefully. I'd love to see that, so definitely one to tune into just from a neutral perspective here. But who knows, maybe because of that it'll be very, very defensive, low scoring. But yeah, I think Georgia Tech, Western Kentucky, both teams very, very solid. Georgia Tech has proven that they should have been a host, maybe having that conference record, but I think they did have the weakest conference schedule in the ACC, so I think that was probably the reason they weren't a host in this instance, even though they won the regular season there. Didn't go on a run in the conference tournament, but as we saw on the announcement video, they were not happy to be a two seed, and getting sent to Ole Miss is a tough environment to be put into, but I think they'll be ready. It's going to be a tough matchup first versus Western Kentucky, a team that didn't lose many games this year, but I think Georgia Tech has the edge in that one, and I think it'll be tough between Ole Miss and Georgia Tech. Those teams are very solid, but I'm going to stick with the hosts here, Ole Miss. It's tough to look past the environment, the atmosphere they have. Some of these SEC schools, that's going to be a huge advantage for them, especially with a lot of them being potential super regional hosts as well. That could just carry them to Omaha. Ole Miss not one of those teams in this instance, but I think it'll definitely help out in the first round, and I'm taking them here.
Yeah, this one is maybe the one I've gone back and forth on the most between Ole Miss and Georgia Tech. Really like both of these teams, and I think this is another one similar to TCU where I'll pick Georgia Tech here. I like a team that was, seemed like they should have hosted, and now they're a little pissed off. I think Georgia Tech does have a high ceiling and has played well against the tougher competition they have faced. Like you said, they had a pretty light conference schedule, but still able to win the regular season title in the ACC, and they have probably the best outfielder in the country in Drew Burris. So I think them playing at a hitter's park over at Ole Miss, I think they'll be mashing, and yeah, it should be a toss up here, but I'll go with Georgia Tech to squeak out of here.
Nice. And now going to Athens, we have number 7 overall seed Georgia hosting Duke, Oklahoma State, and Binghamton. I think tough regional draw for Georgia. Pretty light 4 seed, but the 2-3s could be difficult outs. Duke and Oklahoma State have shown that they can be a really good team if they're playing at their best. But Georgia's home field advantage, they've shown that they are one of the best teams at home, if not the best. So it's definitely tough to look past, especially since they have that potential super regional host. That matchup versus maybe Ole Miss would be electric for supers and going to Omaha in that instance. But Yeah, I think Georgia with that gaudy record at home is tough to look past here, and it's easy to pick them to go to the next round, and so I'm gonna stick with them here.
Yeah, it is a tough regional. Oklahoma State, pretty talented team that underperformed a lot of the year. Um, so certainly a team, a 3 seed capable of coming out of this regional. Duke as well, talented team that kind of hot and cold throughout the year. Never really knew what you were going to get there. Another team I do think is capable of coming out of here, but I'm going to stick with Georgia. Um, just one of the most dominant teams at home this season. Arguably the best home team in the country, 29-4, I believe, and this team absolutely mashes, especially at home. And so I think these other teams, although they do have some good offensive capabilities, I think Georgia's just going to be able to outscore them. And you know, part of the reason I also picked Georgia Tech here, I just as a fan really want to see the Georgia Tech Super Regional. So I'll take Georgia here. Would absolutely love to see that Super Regional. That'd probably be one of my top picks there.
Yeah, definitely would be great to see that. Now going to Baton Rouge for the number 6 overall seed LSU Regional. Dallas Baptist, Rhode Island, and Little Rock joining them. I would say weaker 3 and 4. I think you mentioned it earlier. Maybe the weakest overall regional, but I do think LSU DBU is a very interesting matchup. But because it's the weakest, probably don't expect them to face each other. We'll have some upsets here that we don't expect, but yeah, it's an easy pick to take LSU to come out, and I'm not going to overthink it here.
Yeah, it really is one of the lightest regionals there is. I think Dallas Baptist is a very solid team, um, but this is just a tough task to ask them to take down LSU, especially in Baton Rouge. There, it's going to be an intimidating crowd there. I'll just stick with LSU here. I think they'll handle this one pretty easily. In all honesty.
Yeah, and they have the one of the best, if not the best, 1-2 punch pitching wise. And if they're able to not pitch them in the first game against Little Rock, because Little Rock isn't one of the better 4 seeds, they get set up extremely well to have two of the best pitchers in the country just run through this regional here. But now going to their super regional opposition, Clemson, number 11 overall seed, hosting West Virginia, Kentucky, and USC Upstate. I'd say pretty balanced regional. USC Upstate not a team to look past, so Clemson might have to give them their all there to just get past that 4 seed. And I don't know, I'm still uncertain about this Clemson team. I think they have it enough to get through. They've shown that they are cardiac Clemson, like we've talked about. But I don't know, when you look just at them overall from, a far out lens, I just don't know. I'm still uncertain about this Clemson team. I thought that they really were gonna pull it all together. I thought Cam Canarella was gonna have a better season. I know he performs best when the lights are the brightest. He's still the best defensive center fielder, but his offense just didn't blossom like I thought it would this season. I think everybody kind of is on the same path there. Similarly, like last year, obviously he had that injury, but still didn't see that next step up. And he, still very, very good offensively, but the power numbers just aren't there. Um, he should have pop, but just hasn't been the case. I think West Virginia and Kentucky, both solid squads. You can say all you want about Kentucky not making the tournament. I don't think they should have, but they've proven that they can compete against tough competition. Even though they did come out on the losing end in a lot of those games in the SEC, they did play a lot of games very tight, losing by very few runs in a lot of them. So they have proven that they can keep it close. But in those close games, we've seen Clemson, and we know what they can do in close games. A lot of them they're able to come out on top of. This West Virginia squad hasn't really proven it against top teams. We thought that they could be one of the best teams in the country if they just turned the switch a little bit, but just down the stretch really didn't prove it. They still won the conference regular season, but I think that was primarily just due to the light schedule there. So I think this still is Clemson's regional to lose, but I wouldn't be super surprised if one of these teams did take him down. I think the betting odds kind of resemble that with Clemson not being favored here. But I still think that's a little ridiculous. I would still take Clemson to be favored in this instance, and that's why I'm going to go with them.
Yeah, this Clemson team's an interesting one. I think the ceiling's extremely high. Certainly can make Omaha and go on a run there. At times they've been cardiac Clemson, like you said, but at times throughout the year, it does seem like there's just something missing. Not sure exactly what it is, but it doesn't seem like they've quite been performing, at their best consistently. Um, I'm still going to take them to come out of this regional. I think it's going to be hard necessarily to take them moving further, especially with that matchup against LSU, having to go to LSU if that is the matchup. But, Kentucky, West Virginia, very solid teams, but I think Clemson easily has the highest ceiling here. And given that they're at home, a great fan base there, I'll stick with Clemson.
Yep, I think that's very reasonable. Now going to the Fayetteville Regional, number 3 overall seed Arkansas hosting Kansas, Creighton, and North Dakota State. We could get the rematch of basketball first round in their tournament there with the Battle of the Kansas with Arkansas versus Kansas. Should be exciting if that happens. But Creighton trying to play spoiler to that one there. Did well in their conference tournament, won it, and went on a run. I think Kansas has proven that they are a pretty solid squad. Maybe has their inconsistencies, but could give Arkansas a run for their money. But it is Arkansas, a team that maybe is the best team in the country when they're playing at full tilt there. So definitely an easy pick here for me, taking the hosts. But you never know. I think this regional isn't super loaded. Definitely one of, I would say, the easier ones just on paper. So I think Arkansas should be able to handle it.
Yeah, I think Creighton and Kansas are very solid teams, but I think this regional might have the biggest skill gap between the number 1 and 2 team. I just don't think it's even close on a talent level between Arkansas and Kansas. I think Arkansas will handle this regional very easily. I'll be pretty surprised if they even lose a game in this series. I think it'll be a easy 3-0, sweep on the weekend for them, and move on to supers.
Yeah, and speaking of their supers matchup, it's the Knoxville Regional, the last regional we have to talk about. Number 14 overall seed Tennessee, hosting Wake Forest, Cincinnati, and Miami, Ohio. I think this is a very intriguing regional. Cincinnati and Wake Forest could make some noise here. We have talked about Tennessee and their struggles at home. I do think they'll wake up a little bit. They definitely did it in their conference tournament, so hopefully they keep playing along those lines. But the defense and just the little things has been the struggle for Tennessee this entire season, and that always seems to escalate during postseason. So I'm really unsure what could happen in this regional. I do want to see Tennessee, Arkansas in the supers. I think that would be electric. But Wake Forest, Cincinnati definitely could be playing spoilers here. Cincinnati plays a very aggressive style of baseball on the base paths, and that would just wreak havoc against Tennessee, who doesn't even seem like they care about throwing runners out. And Wake Forest, a team that can mash the ball, and we know how small that field plays at Tennessee. So Wake Forest definitely a team that could put up some big power numbers. So a lot of different varying styles of baseball here that could all give Tennessee a lot of struggles. But from that, still do think Tennessee's the favorite. Liked what I saw in the conference tournament when they went on a run to put them in a spot to host. So I think they'll be able to keep that momentum going. I think they got the fan base to buy back in. There was a lot of, noise in the background for a while about Tennessee struggling at home, but I think that run in the conference tournament may have settled things down a little bit and get the fan base back on board there. So I think that'll definitely help. But, if one thing goes wrong, I think things could really flip for this Tennessee squad. But sticking with them for now, but we'll see. Might have to change my prediction later in the week.
Yeah, I think this is one of my favorite 2-3 matchups on the board. Yeah, arguably my favorite. I think it's really intriguing. Wake Forest, very talented team, can absolutely mash, like you said. And then Cincinnati hasn't been consistent throughout the year, but they've shown flashes. And like you said, they can kind of just create chaos, especially on the base paths there. So that could be especially problematic if they do face up against Tennessee, whether that's in the winners or losers side of this regional. Um, so I think this first matchup between Wake and Cincinnati will be very interesting. I struggle to see Cincinnati actually coming out of this regional altogether. Um, I'll go ahead and stick with Tennessee here. I think this will be a fun one. We could see some interesting results here, but I do think Tennessee will come out of it at the end.
Yeah, we didn't pick that many upsets coming out of regionals here, but I do think it just feels like a year that there could just be a ton. But also, you never know. Maybe there's none. I think the parity really will be emphasized in regionals here. We'll see what goes on in these instances. But because of that, I really do think there's a lot of coin tosses of games could go either way, but that might also lend its way to having home field advantage even more, where it just gets emphasized that having those large crowds and fan base on your side will really just push teams to be a lot better and than the competition when they don't have that on their sides. But now heading into our 8 for Omaha, we kind of gave our predictions along the way for the 16 teams that would make supers. But now jumping ahead, 8 for Omaha, go for the very top teams, starting with Vanderbilt. I just think they have a very easy route. It's hard to predict who comes out of that Southern Miss 16 seed, and because of that, it's easy to just go with Vanderbilt here as the more safe pick, and because of that, I'll be doing that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see Vanderbilt get upset in this super regional, but it's hard to know who exactly is coming out of that Southern Miss regional. So I'll stick with Vandy. I think it's the safe play, and they have been playing well down the stretch. So I'll stick with them here.
Yep, and now going to the Tallahassee Corvallis side of things, the teams that come out. I'm gonna go with Florida State. I think you mentioned for that Corvallis regional, Oregon State. It's a tough one for them, so it's a lot easier to pick the team that maybe has the easier route to get there. And I think Florida State just looks like a very complete squad right now. So I see them doing pretty well. And I think, especially for a normal weekend series like you see in Super Regionals, it really gives emphasis to having an ace. And Florida State has that guy in Jamie Arnold. So that's an easy pick for me.
Yeah, same here. It's just hard to imagine Florida State losing that, Friday matchup. I guess it could be a Saturday matchup, some super starting on Saturday, but don't see them dropping that first game, regardless of who they're playing here, TCU or Oregon State, most likely. Yeah, I'll just stick with Florida State here. I think they're going to be the most talented team in this matchup, regardless of who they end up facing.
Yep, now looking at the winners of the Chapel Hill and Eugene regionals, I'm going to go with a little bit of an upset here. Go Oregon. I think North Carolina looks like one of the best teams in the country. It should be tough. But I think Oregon also a squad that has looked pretty complete overall. Good pitching, good hitting when they're hot. So definitely will be able to compete with North Carolina. But I do think this is definitely a super regional that should be very exciting if both these teams make it. And I have Oregon just coming out on the winning side here.
Yeah, this is one of the supers I went back and forth on the most here. I think both of these teams are very capable of reaching Omaha, obviously, and I think both are capable of making a run in Omaha as well. I'm going to stick with North Carolina here. Just one of the hottest teams in the country right now. The pitching staff is just looking especially dominant right now, and with the offense starting to click as well. Just given that they're at home here, Oregon would be traveling completely across the country here. That's tough to do as well. I'll stick with North Carolina.
Yeah, now headed to the Conway Auburn regionals. Piping in, I had actually two seeds coming out of this one, so no regional hosts with Florida and NC State as the teams here, and I have a feeling Florida's gonna continue their run as they always do in the postseason with these underperforming squads. So I'm going with them as finishing out bracket number 1 for the College World Series.
Yeah, this is a difficult one here. I had both of the one seeds coming through, Coastal and Auburn. It's a difficult one. I think this would be a very intriguing matchup to watch. Would love to just sit and watch this series as a fan. I'll stick with Auburn here, just given they'd be at home. Yeah, I just sometimes go back to that factor of having one of the best players in the country on your team. I think that really helps you when you're in these tense moments. Just having a guy you can rely on, know that's going to produce for you in those clutch moments. And so I'll stick with Auburn and like Irish to make it into Omaha here.
Now going to the other side of the bracket, we have the Austin and Los Angeles regionals. I had Texas and UCLA coming out of them. And I have a feeling that Texas might run out of luck here. They had a great season, first year under Schlossnagel, but just feels like they're running out of juice with the injuries and haven't playing well down the stretch. And UCLA kind of turning things on late. They look like a very complete squad, so I'm going to go with UCLA here.
Yeah, I'm also going to go with the upset pick here. I think we have very similar opinions on how Texas has looked down the stretch, just not like the team they were looking like through the first half of the year. And, you know, some of that's due to injuries, some of that's just due to fizzling out and not being as hot as they were before. But I think, like you mentioned, UCLA is a team that's been turning it up a bit to end the season. And so I kind of like the upset pick here as well. I'll pick UCLA to make it to Omaha.
Yeah, and I think when we did see Texas winning all those games, there were just so many close ones that they were just eking by. It seemed like eventually things were going to catch up to them, and it did happen, and we'll see if they're able to turn things around from there. But yeah, it feels like they might be just running out of it. But now going to the Oxford Athens matchup for supers, I had Ole Miss and Georgia, both hosts coming out. I have a feeling that Georgia will keep their run going. Just being hosts, like we mentioned, the record at home is super impressive, and this Georgia squad just knows how to hit at home. And they'll put up offensive numbers no matter the team they're facing. Even Ole Miss, who had a very, very good run down the stretch of pitching and defense where they were barely giving up any runs. I think it's a completely different environment when you're facing Georgia at their place. So I'm going to go with Georgia here.
Yeah, I'm also gonna stick with Georgia here. I have Georgia Tech, which would just be an absolutely electric super regional. My favorite that is on the list of potential matchups I have here. I think this would just be awesome. A lot of talent on both teams, but I'll just stick with Georgia. Like I mentioned in the regional, one of the best teams, if not the best team in the country at home, and just an extremely deep roster. Yeah, one that I think is capable of going far and winning it all. I think they were your preseason pick to win it all. Probably would have been mine as well, but didn't want to double down with you. Yeah, I like this team a lot and see them going far here.
Yeah, it should be a very exciting matchup. Whoever comes out of those regionals should be super fun to see. That now going to the Baton Rouge Clemson regionals, I had LSU Clemson both coming out, both hosts, and even though I'm little concerned about Clemson for some reason, maybe I just feel it that this is the year they break through. Maybe I'm wrong. Feels like obviously LSU at the box is going to be extremely difficult, but Clemson always shows up when the lights are the brightest, it seems. So I think it should be very exciting if these teams make it that far. And I'm going to stick with Clemson here and hope for the best. But LSU definitely a favorite from the outside looking in.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I had Clemson picked most of the time leading up to this, but I switched it last second to LSU. Uh, but I'd love to see Clemson make it out of here. You know, the last couple of years, it felt like they were destined to make Omaha, just couldn't quite get over the hump. They've had some insane matchups, and they just haven't gone their way. Would love to see it go their way. I think the program and some of those players are very deserving, but given that it's on the road at LSU, LSU has one of the best rotations in the country right now. And so I'll stick with LSU here, but this would be an absolutely electric matchup.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely would be. And now going to our last matchups, Knoxville and Fayetteville regionals. Heading in, I had Tennessee, Arkansas as the teams making it out. and I just feel like Arkansas will have the juice to get through. They played very tight games previously, but when Arkansas is playing their best, especially at home, the fans will be even crazier than they were in the regular season. I think this just leads for Arkansas making it, and we'll see. Maybe they finally make it and get those Omahawks back there. Has been a while, even with those top teams that they have had, just haven't been able to get there. Tennessee's definitely a tough foe to get back to Omaha, but I think Arkansas has the edge here.
Yeah, I'm also going to stick with Arkansas here. I just still, up to this point, think Arkansas is the best team in the country when they're playing their best. Um, just extremely talented, probably the best offense in the SEC, and extremely talented arms on the mound as well. They haven't, always been clicking throughout the year, but when they have been, this team just looks absolutely dominant. And given that they're at home here, I'll give that they're I'll bank on the fact that they're able to click again and be able to take advantage of that atmosphere and move on to Omaha.
Sweet. Well, those are our 8 for Omaha. Now we'll go in and choose who we think are going to make the championship game and then choose our champion. From the top bracket, I think it's not necessarily the most difficult. Vanderbilt, Florida State, Oregon, Florida for me. For some reason, I'm feeling Oregon. I think they have a pretty complete squad. It's going to be tough. They will, I believe, face Florida State in that first match. It should be an electric matchup. Both teams have very solid Friday night guys, so should be a low-scoring one there. But for some reason, leading Oregon to make it out of this thing.
Yeah, on this top part, I'm gonna stick with the other team coming out of that super regional. I'm gonna go with North Carolina. Like we've mentioned throughout this episode, just one of the hottest teams in the country. So I just like the way they're playing right now. I think they have one of the highest ceilings in the country as well, and so gonna stick with them to continue clicking, and I'll pick them to make it out of that bracket one.
Yep, and now for the second half, I have UCLA, Georgia, Clemson, Arkansas making it. And don't want to overcomplicate things. I think Arkansas is one of the best teams, if not the best, when they're at full tilt, playing their best ball. And I'm going to continue with that here. I think Georgia could make a run. I think this is a more solid, at least complete side. I think all these teams don't really have that many gaps in their team. Georgia may be on the pitching, but their offense is extremely explosive. I think UCLA, maybe not offensively is that impressive, but they're very solid, and Clemson just knows how to win. But Arkansas, when they're playing their best, looks unstoppable, and for that reason, I'm going to pick them to get out of this half.
Yeah, I certainly think this half of the bracket is the tougher side. Feels like there's a lot more talented teams on this side for whatever reason. I'm also going to stick with Arkansas. Like we've mentioned, this episode, previous episodes, just seems like the best team in the country when they're playing their best. And so I'm going to pick them to get hot and, make it to another College World Series final here. We'll see if they're able to end on the right side of things.
Yeah, I could have stuck with my guns with Georgia coming out and winning the whole thing, but I don't know. Opinions change throughout the season. Arkansas looks like that team to beat. For that, I'm going to stick with them to win the whole thing, win the championship. I think they're going to have an insane fan base if they make it this far. Going to give them such a huge advantage no matter who they're facing, but especially a team like Oregon who probably won't travel extraordinarily well. But yeah, Arkansas will just pack that place up, and they've been waiting for quite a long time, and now facing the team that is rivals to the team that they lost to previously. With the should be very exciting to see that if that's the case. I mean, obviously a lot of things have to go right for all these teams to make it this far. Arkansas, I think, has the best chance of running the table here.
Yeah, so my matchup is Arkansas, North Carolina. I'm going to stick with Arkansas here as well. So we're doubling down on it. Definitely means they won't be able to pull it off now. But, 5 straight SEC teams winning the title, all different teams. So got to pick another SEC team here, and it has to be different. So picking Arkansas and Dave Van Horn to finally get over the hump and win that title for Arkansas. I really hope Arkansas North Carolina um, final series comes to fruition. That would be electric, and yeah, just two of the best teams in the country throughout the year. Extremely talented. Yeah, star power on both teams, and it'd be a lot of fun.
Well, we both took the team that we had making it out of that super regional as the opposition for Arkansas. So I guess that super regional is the most important one in our case here. But think that is that for running through all the regionals, getting through who we think might make it to Omaha and the champions over there in Fayetteville. So hope everybody enjoyed. We'll have some more great content coming forward now that Super Regionals will be played next week. Regionals will be super exciting to watch. Exciting to see probably a lot of upsets. Who knows? We didn't predict them, but because of that, we're kind of buying in for that to potentially happen. And if that happens, I'd rather have that than it to be chalk. So we're going on the side of being cautious, but if that's the case, and we lose a lot of our predictions, then I'm fine by that, and get a lot of upsets going on to the next round. Should be super exciting to see, anyways. But any last comments from you?
No, it should be a lot of fun. It feels like this year is wide open, a lot of talented teams, but not necessarily any super teams, and so could see a lot of upsets, could see a lot of chalk. It feels like we picked a lot of chalk, but there definitely could be upsets as well, and excited to see what happens.
Sweet. Well, we have been the Sweet Baseball Podcast, and we will see you for Super Regional previews. Peace.